When there's a deal of this magnitude on the table, your shareholders do not want that deal.
Sure, Michael, what does this do to the value of CBS, the former Tiffany network, when people cannot know whether to trust it anymore, when they wonder what stories they'll be, and I know you laugh, Scott, because you think no one's
I think people have lost trust in it for a lot of reasons. It has nothing to do with this deal.
What's happening, everybody? Scott Jennings was back at his usual seat on Newsnight with Abby Phillip. Abby Phillip seemed extra condescending in addition to her usual inordinate number of interruptions aimed at Scott Jennings. The topic of discussion in this clip was the resignation of 60 Minutes executive producer Bill Owens in the wake of Kamalagate. All right, I mean, that's not a thing, but you know what I mean. Anyway, let's watch Scott Jennings, with an assist from Shermichael Singleton, give a panel of legacy media dinosaurs a reality check as to where Americans get their news. Let's go.
I think that the problem is first you had the ABC settlement that was a few months ago. And then if you now have a CBS settlement, he's going after the Associated Press. A judge just ruled in Voice of America's favor today. So you have the media will succeed in somewhat, just like you're reporting earlier. I mean, if CBS were allowed this to move forward, it's likely going to be in their favor. But there are entities, institutions that feel like they need to bend the knee to Donald Trump. And this isn't just about the media. It is about law firms. It is about universities. It is about potential nonprofits.
And it's not just about bending the knee. It's also about paying bribes to Trump. The ABC settlement was nothing short of baksheesh.
Yes.
And the CBS settlement would be the same.
And it sets a terrible precedent. I mean, one of the things that Trump has tried to do is he's trying to silence the media. And by having these agreements with ABC and potentially CBS, with law firms, with with potential universities, it's silencing institutions that don't agree with him. And that is where I think the American people should be worried about.
And a First Amendment violation, to be sure.
Absolutely.
Look, I understand Sherry Redstone's position. She's a majority shareholder. She has a fiduciary responsibility to the other shareholders to try to get this deal done. I know if I owned 1% of it, I'd certainly tell her you need to figure this out by any means necessary. As it pertains to the gentleman resigning, I mean, to your point, Jeff, I don't know what significance this will hold. I don't know what percent of Americans still watch 60 Minutes.
Would you?
I mean, you said
figure.
I don't know the influence.
You say
of this
figure it out.
show
Do you?
anymore.
Would you? You said figure it out. Would you advise Sherry Redstone to do what is being alleged here, which is perhaps pressure CBS?
I just know in business, when there's a deal of this magnitude on the table, your shareholders do not want that deal.
Sure, Michael, what does this do to the value of CBS, the former Tiffany network, when people cannot know whether to trust it anymore, when they wonder what stories they'll be, and I know you laugh, Scott, because you think no one's trust.
I think people have lost trust in it for a lot of reasons. It has nothing to do with this deal.
It, but I think now the problem is that it ruins its brand with that audience who did trust and did care about them, and that affects the value of the company.
No, Jeff, I take that point. I guess I would offer a different position here. If I were to run CBS, my bigger question would be, how do I maintain whatever market share I have? And right now, they got a viewership problem.
Well,
so I'm not really sure.
Does 60 Minutes really have a view? I mean, 60 Minutes is different from
overall,
CBS
as a whole,
but 60 Minutes in particular is a flagship
This is the bigger
magazine.
The bigger question is that mass media are dying. I hate to say this in the middle of mass media.
I mean, we all know that.
But mass media are dying. And so if you try to think that we're going to please everybody, those days are over. You've got to stand on some principle. You've got to stand for something. You've got to be somewhere in the spectrum. And if you think you're just going to make nice to everybody, the problem is that the right wing, hello, Scott, has taken advantage of this situation, I think, quite cleverly, quite wisely. They've played into a weakness.
What situation?
The situation of media being under attack. And so they've created a situation where...
You've almost got it. Keep going. What the right wing is taking advantage of is finally the American people saying enough is enough. They're tired of feeling like the mass media screens out one viewpoint versus another in political coverage. They're tired of media institutions favoring one party over another. They're tired of narratives over factual stories. If I had any advice for 60 Minutes or anybody else, it would be just cover the news and try to be fair about it and stop putting your finger on the scale, especially during campaigns.
You're talking about the old mass media myth that you could have this thing that was in the middle. The Walter Cronkite saying, that's the way it is, when it wasn't for many Americans the way it was. When people were pissed off.
People back in those days trusted the media, didn't they?
No, they just couldn't be heard. because there was no two
Look at
way.
the
Now
Gallup
we have
polling.
the internet.
Look at the
and now
Gallup
we can
polling.
talk.
It was here, and now it's here. It's fallen off of a cliff.
Yeah, we do have that Gallup polling
It's
about
terrible.
trust
Yeah.
in media, and now, as in recent years,
Why should we be mourning a liar leaving a liberal propaganda program that's part of a dying medium? What a selfless guy. What a martyr. Give me a break. So the ABC settlement was a bribe, according to that guy. No. What this gentleman apparently doesn't understand or is lying to himself about is that there's a limit to the extent to which you can lie about someone. You can't knowingly and accurately call anyone, forget Donald Trump, a racist 20 times in a row and not be guilty of slander. Accountability is like kryptonite to these people because they can't even understand the concept. They've gone their entire careers without anyone checking them on the flat out lies that they spread intentionally. I mean, the good news specific to 60 Minutes is no one watches them anyway. The whole way I remember this 60 Minutes clever editing of the Kamala interview going down was after it happened, there were multiple people saying, including me, if you got nothing to hide 60 Minutes, just release the transcript. They refused to do it, and I don't really remember ever hearing a really good reason why. But to any of us that were questioning him, the obvious conclusion was, if you've got nothing to hide, then why not release the transcript and exonerate yourselves of these accusations? Then when I think this story picked up steam and more people were like, release the transcripts, 60 Minutes response was like, I don't have to, like a little kid. But also think about this, for a mainstream liberal media outlet, wouldn't it have been a great opportunity to stick it to all of us right-wing conspiracy theorists? To me, for 60 Minutes in the liberal media, in hindsight, it seems like there was so much upside to releasing the transcripts if 60 Minutes had nothing to hide. A phrase I'm not hearing thrown around at all in this is election interference. Anyone that was paying attention, I assume even many of the folks that voted for her, knew that Kamala didn't have a clue what was going on, sounded like a liar every time she opened her mouth because she never answered questions, but talked in rambling word salads and came across fake as, something that's really, really fake. A $3 bill, how's that? Bottom line, 60 Minutes intentionally tried to make Kamala Harris appear to be something she's not. Smart, human, coherent. We've still got more good Scott and Shermichael to come, so let's get back to it.
years, and let's be honest, Scott, a lot of this is driven by the rhetoric on your side of the
Look at the
aisle.
colors.
I mean, it's
Sorry,
not.
you think it's driven by the rhetoric and not the performance?
Absolutely. Okay. On the question of whether what is Trump's interest in this? That's one of the questions. Is it to have media that is in the middle, that is fair? Here is just a sampling of what has been happening at the White House as Trump has, he's entitled to do this, but invited very sycophantic media into the White House. Listen.
Why don't you wear a suit? And you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if do you own a suit?
Right. Will you guys also consider releasing the president's fitness plan? He actually looks healthier than ever before. Healthier than he did 8 years ago, and I'm sure everybody in this room could agree. Is he working out with Bobby Kennedy? And is he eating less McDonald's?
Photos have emerged of Senator Van Hollen sipping what appears to be margaritas with Abreu Garcia down in El Salvador. Do you encourage other Democrats to fly down to El Salvador to meet with this illegal alien who's an accused wife beater?
I like this guy. See, now this is the kind of a reporter we like.
Trump is not interested in middle of the road Walter Cronkite reporting, and I think it's also completely ahistorical to describe Walter Cronkite as somebody who did not have a point of view, as he very famously did. But Trump is not interested in that, Scott. He's not.
Of course he's not. No, look, no politician, no president, Democrat or Republican, wants to be pilloried every day, and all of them believe they're being treated unfairly, and they all want to be treated better than they think they're being treated.
So is this
That's
about
true for all of
trust
them.
in media, or
But
is it about bringing in more media that is favorable to him? I think that's the question.
But my point is this. If you're CBS or any other news outlet, the reason that you have lost trust ought to be obvious to you, and the way to fix it also ought to be obvious to you, and it has nothing to do with Donald Trump and everything to do with the product. Just try to make a better product that appeals to more people. And the way you appeal to more people is by not crapping on half or more than half of the country because of their values and political viewpoints.
I think that is a fair, just if we were sort of on another planet out of context, it is a fair description of what is necessary in this moment. But I think in the context of this particular moment, where the pressure is coming from up high, the question is, what does the administration want? What would be the price that Sherry Redstone has to pay in order to get a yes on their deal?
There's no price you can pay. Look at what happened with Columbia. Look what happened to law firms. Look what happened with the AP. If you bend at the knee, you get kneecapped. And I think to the point of the Associated Press, what should have happened is the rest of the press should have walked out. I was at an event at Columbia yesterday where the dean of the journalism school there asked that question of A.G. Sulzberger of the New York Times, and there was resistance to that idea. But as Jelani Cobb, the dean at Columbia, said, what you'd end up with in that press room then is, and these are my words, the freak show that Trump wants. Trump tries to devalue media. Why should we value his freak show there? Leave it to the freaks.
I think there's one more thing that we're not talking about. We're walking into White House correspondent dinner weekend, and I'm seeing corporate sponsors and other folks who want to give money to good things, like giving scholarships to journalism students, an event that I host, where corporations want nothing to do with it because it's hosted by a brown guy, because they're like, we're not doing DE&I this year because we don't want to be punished.
But I would just say quickly here, if you look at the media landscape now, it is more democratized where people are getting and sourcing their information from. It does come from a lot of these non-traditional places. So if you're the White House and you want to communicate with at least a third of the country, and maybe they're watching Joe Rogan or someone else, I would argue it makes sense to have individuals representative from these spaces there.
But they're not freaks. I think calling them freaks.
I don't think there's any disagreement on that, by the way.
I mean, he called these new media sources the freak show. They're not freaks. They have audiences.
Some of them are.
They have audiences, and there's a reason that they're thriving is because people are starved for information that they think they can trust. They're not freaks. They're filling a need in this country, in my opinion.
Right.
One of the worst takes I've heard in a long time from Abby Phillips there was, a lot of this is driven by the rhetoric on your side of the aisle, Scott. I think she might actually believe what she's saying, but here's the problem. She's skipping over the media's actions that have led to that rhetoric and blaming people's reactions to their lies. It's analogous to me punching a random person in the face daily for my entire life, then one day finally getting sued for my bad behavior and saying this whole lawsuit is driven by all the people saying that I'm a bad guy, and going, well, I'm great. What's the problem? Do you see how I didn't address the fact that I've been beating people up indiscriminately for decades? I just went straight to what people thought about it and what they said about it. And if I were in this imaginary situation, I'd probably say something like, yeah, those people criticizing me are just freaks. What a great way to dismiss my role and how I got myself into the situation. Let's wrap up with this. What the mainstream liberal media is really mourning is the continued erosion of the facade they've so smugly sat behind forever of unbiased news organizations. They're mad that having integrity in reporting the news actually matters to people now, and another person and program in their snooty little club has been exposed. But what do you guys think about all this? Do you think that Donald Trump is censoring news sources or holding them accountable? Which is it? Or is it a little bit of both? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you like watching videos of Scott Jennings dominating the panel at CNN, then click on one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. Otherwise, as always, I've got the best viewers on the planet. There's no question. I really appreciate you taking a couple minutes out of your day to watch my video. Never, ever forget, Jesus loves you very much. I'll see you guys.